Welcome back to They Did What? Your source for the internet's craziest, most entertaining stories, where I go over them, analyze them, and on occasion, make fun of them. Today, going to do an update to a video I did yesterday. It's a part 2, if you will, but from the woman's perspective of the video I did yesterday about the guy who was with his woman, who became his wife, and she cheated on him multiple times, and he always, not necessarily very happily, but he always would forgive her. And she also got pregnant with some other dude's kid. But eventually, enough was enough, and he's ending the marriage. And she's begging him to come back and a second chance and all that. And you can see, if for those of you who saw the story, she definitely was someone that was just a terrible communicator. And whenever things were bad, she would just go off and cheat. That pretty much from the get-go, she told him flat out really who she was. Asked him about cheating and his opinions on that. And the guy he kept staying with her. She would cheat, he'd get pissed off, there'd be some turmoil, he'd stay with her. And I made it clear, first time shame on them, second time shame on you. This guy brought on all this misery on himself. You know, she's no saint by any means, no way, but he just kept giving her another chance and finally had enough was enough. Now, this story or post is her perspective. She actually found this guy's story on Reddit, and obviously they're separated now because he's divorcing her, and she decided to share her version of the story. So for you guys that watched it yesterday, this should be relatively fresh in your head, and I'll mention little tidbits of what was going on. And you're going to see here as I go through this, if she acknowledges things that she did wrong, there's always a little twist to give an excuse or twist things around and make it that she wasn't quite the bad guy in the situation. When, believe me, she's definitely the bad guy in many a situation. And then at the end, where she's gotten some therapy, all of a sudden you're going to see her new take on things. It's definitely interesting and entertaining. So the title of her story is, I, a 29-year-old female, cheated on my husband, a 32-year-old male. I got pregnant and had a procedure. Cheated again, and we hit each other. She starts out saying, I use Reddit too. If you thought I wouldn't stumble upon your post, you clearly didn't think it would blow up the way it did. She's writing this to her husband, who is now divorcing her. She says, I was 20 years old when I met my husband. We met when we were both traveling around Europe. I was just finishing my trip and he was just starting his. We met and slept together the same day and spent my last few days together. For anyone saying that this was a red flag for him any more than it was for me, your sexism is showing. In other words, they met together in Madrid on vacation. They hit it off. They hooked up for a few days. And in my opinion, hey, they're adults. They're having fun. Fine. They're using protection. Okay. No big deal. Some people don't agree with me, but that's your own business. After he went home, we struck up communication again and had a long-distance relationship that lasted a year. During this time, we talked about previous relationships and why they failed. I told him my ex dumped me for kissing another girl, and she says, and at that time, I didn't think it was a big deal. But I had since realized that cheating is cheating, and it was wrong of me to do it. Yes, in the other story, she asked him that question. He said it was obviously, that's it. It's you cheat, you're done, but he doesn't live up to those standards. And I pointed out the fact that she brought this up and the fact that she had cheated in the past, whether at the time she didn't think it was cheating, that shows who she really is. And as you remember, guys, this is something that would happen over and over again. You got to pay attention to these red flags when you are dating in the early days of a relationship to see who you're with. And if you think someone who's a cheater in the past is going to do it to you when things get bad, you're sorely mistaken. He moved to me as his work and freelance, and he can do it from anywhere. And I had spent the last year settling into a job that I really liked. This was his suggestion. He makes more money than me and wanted to buy a house right away. I told him I would rather wait until we were married. She says in parentheses, we had discussed marriage at length, and it's what we both wanted. And we could buy one together. But he said he didn't want to throw money away on rent, and when we got married and I signed a prenup, he would put my name on the mortgage. So he moved to be with her, and I said that was a mistake because he's going to her. That's put him in a submissive role, regardless of what she has to say. If she came to him, it would be a different ballgame. And he wanted to buy a house. And watch this whole thing about the prenup. He also wanted a prenup, which he's not happy with. And in a moment, guys, you're going to start to see where her passive-aggressive behavior starts to manifest. So They got married. She signed a prenup. And she says, the suggestion of the prenup was offensive as he knew my family was well off and I never cared about money. But I agreed. Then if you're offended by that, then you don't get married to the guy. The guy has every reason to get a prenup given the times. And it doesn't make a difference if your family has money. A spiteful, angry ex-wife could come after you for it anyway, regardless of her family's money or what kind of money she makes. So I don't blame that guy in the least. That's a strike that she's pissed off about. I also wanted to keep my own last name if we got married, and he said he wouldn't marry me if I didn't take his last name. This I also agreed to. He said fair is fair, and if I wanted to live and raise kids near my family, not his, and I'll be the one to stay at home while he worked when we had kids, which I wanted. Then I had to make compromises too. I didn't think these were fair compromises, but I agreed. He bought the house against my wishes, and then we got married. And to his credit, he put my name on the mortgage the following week. But all this left a bitter taste in my mouth. So she's mad because he wanted her to change her last name, which is a traditional way of doing things. She's mad because, God forbid, he got a prenup, which was a smart idea, by the way. And he wanted to buy a house because it worked out well, and he didn't want to waste money on rent. You can't blame the guy. So these are things that are going to be building up. Instead of her saying, you know what, this is going to work for me, she went and married him anyway. And instead of communicating her issues, these things bottled up. And you're going to see how she handles when things get bottled up. For the most part, things were great. I had a good social life and was outgoing. He was more of a stay-at-home type. I had lots of friends. He was focused on work. You mean focused on his purpose? As a man should be? We were different, but we made it work. One of the men I worked with expressed an interest, even knowing I was married, and I told him no. I told my husband this, and he asked me to stop spending time with him outside of work. That's not unreasonable. I told him no, as I had already shot the other man down. Pay attention to that. That was a mistake on my part, and I admit it. When things were good, they were great. But I also had resentments about the decisions I'd been forced to make and felt less like an equal partner in the marriage by the day. He bought a dog without my consent. When we were long distance, I told him I wanted a dog, but I wanted to wait until we had the kids so they could bond together. He claims I never mentioned this last part. He says I didn't. I say I did. He claimed it was a surprise for me and that I was ungrateful for kicking up a fuss, so the dog stayed. That's man's best friend. You bet your ass the dog stays. Just like Godfather Part 2, the dog stays. You Godfather fans out there, you know what I'm talking about. So we can add the dog to the list of grievances she has against this guy. God forbid. She says, now what I'm about to read really sums up who she is. I've never been great at communicating and prefer my own space when things go bad. So instead of talking about these issues, I let them fester and spent more time with my friends, including the guy from work. Passive aggressive lets things build up, and then she punishes. Lets it go, builds up, and then she punishes. This is the cycle through the whole thing for you guys that saw the thing yesterday. Communication is key for a relationship, guys, for you relationship guys out there. And if you don't communication, and it's something like this, it is going to be a recipe for a never-ending roller coaster of drama and disaster. My husband was overprotective and asked me to check in with him if I was out late and asked me not to stay out at night, even when I was staying at a female friend's house. I'm not the apron or dishwashing type of woman. I've always valued my freedom. These arguments drove a wedge between us, and I made a terrible decision. Gee, what could that be? I was drunk and slept with the guy from the office. I came home after and slept on the couch and cried all night. There you go. That's her punishment for God forbid him getting a dog, buying a house, wanting to have her have his last name, and something else I forget. And this is the reason why he didn't want her hanging out with that dude, because he could sense something was up. Because that dude didn't care that she was married. And pretty soon you're going to hear her justification for all these things and the guy. My husband came down the next morning and attacked me for not coming home at a reasonable time. He said I was a mess because I slept in the clothes that I went out in and looked like a escort. The other man, Greg, never said things like this to me. He enjoyed being social and dancing and all the other things my husband didn't. I was young and stupid and decided to keep seeing him. So it wasn't just a one-time thing. She kept seeing this dude. If you weren't happy, you should have ended it. He was kind and decent, and the more times I spent with him, the more I wished I'd met him first. Okay, you weren't happy with your marriage, end it. End of story. Wished you met him first, but nope, I'm going to stay with this guy, probably because the husband makes more money and he's stable. Meanwhile, she's effing this other dude. And by the way, she said this guy's fun and nice and all this stuff like that. Well, he doesn't live with you. He doesn't get to see the other side of you that obviously your husband does. She continues, I found out I was pregnant. I didn't know who the baby was, and I was racked with guilt. I told Greg the day I found out, and he told me to get a procedure. That he didn't want to get caught up in the middle of raising a kid with a married woman. There you go. Chad and Tyrone don't want to do that. This was the moment when the affair ended. I told my husband a week later. He didn't have to pry the truth out of me like he said in the post. A couple months in, he saw me upset, and I told him. He flew home without telling me and ignored my calls. I realized I made a terrible mistake and decided to recommit to my marriage. I told him I would get a procedure if the child wasn't his. He told me to go F myself and hung up. You can't blame this guy for being pissed, taken off for a while, and saying what he did. Because she cheated the first time, because he was pissed off about those things those awful things he did. And I'm being sarcastic. Then she kept having an affair with the dude until she got pregnant. And then all of a sudden, the affair partner, I'm not raising a kid. That's how Chad and Tyrone roll. Eventually, he came home and found that the baby wasn't his. So, as we agreed, I put on the appointment for the procedure. When we did the paternity test, the doctor asked me if I wanted to know the sex. My husband answered for me and says it doesn't matter, and we left. I went back without him and found out it wasn't it was a she, my daughter. Over the course of the week, I had thoughts of being a mother. I'd always wanted to raise kids, and my fantasies during this week, I didn't think about the other man. This was my husband's baby. I pictured the three of us getting together as a family. This wasn't your husband's baby. This was your affair partner's baby, and your husband didn't want to have anything to do with it. You can't blame the guy. And we're not going to get into politics here, so I'm not going to address any of that, especially how things are going with the Supreme Court right now. This channel's for entertainment and stories, not politics. I'm not going to get into that. I'm just reading this, guys. I don't want people getting all crazy in the comment section. It wasn't ideal, but there was no good reason I could think of that we couldn't make the best of a bad situation. It's a bad situation for him, not for you. It's a humiliation to him and a constant reminder of what you did. Now, you could choose to have the child, but if your husband says, okay, you can go ahead and do that, but then we're done, I'm moving on, so she makes a choice. Okay, nobody forces her into anything. I planned to tell him who the father really was. I panicked and told him it was a one-time thing while I was away for the weekend, and I would quit my job. It wasn't perfect, but if he had loved me, he could make it work. Life throws tests at us, and when I took my marriage vows, I realized this and hope he would too. What the hell are you talking about? We can make it work. Again, you're not quite getting the humiliation and insult towards the husband. And this whole thing about her marriage vows, don't get all high and mighty about the marriage vows. You're the one who, again, because you were bottled up with all this anger inside, you're going to take it out on him by cheating with your coworker and then having a ongoing affair with him for several months until you got pregnant. If you didn't get pregnant, it probably would have continued. So I don't want to hear about the marriage vows and get all high and mighty here. See the twisting things around what I'm talking about, guys? The day of the appointment, I begged him not to make me choose. I begged him to do one thing for me, not to commit to a lifetime of it, not even to try to love the baby, just do this one thing for me. I begged him to try. He's not forcing you to do anything. You make a choice. You want to have the child? Okay. But we are getting divorced because you cheated on me and had an affair and blah, 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 blah. Or the other choice. Nobody's being forced into anything here. I asked him to give it a chance. He told me he was filing for divorce. I need to make something clear. Yes, I made mistakes, but I love my husband. She wrote that in giant letters. No, you don't. You're right. Words and actions. Your actions are saying something completely different than your words. He was the great love of my life. Bullshit. And still is. Bullshit. He told me he wouldn't even try to make it work, and if I didn't have the operation, he would leave me and file for divorce that day. Believe me, the husband should have filed the divorce when he found out about the affair. Okay, but he stays with her, as you all know, and it gets worse. I asked him to let me think about it, and he said no to that too. I was torn between two horrible choices, and I chose one. If I had the procedure, I was never going to raise a baby alone. If he wasn't with me on this, I wasn't going through with it, and he made it clear he wasn't with me. The few weeks after the operation, I was in more pain than I had ever been in my life. During this time, I stayed with my parents because we couldn't be around each other. I blamed him for making me choose. He still hated me for the cheating, and even told me he hated me for wanting to keep the baby and for asking him to be around for us. But I didn't want to be it in vain, so I moved back home and tried to make it work. You see? Now remember, this is the woman who, when she was pissed off about the other things, let it build up and build up and build up, and that's how the affair started, and then the pregnancy. Now she's mad about him about all the things that happened. And now a new round of things are going to build up and build up and build up. And can you take a wild guess, guys? Obviously you know because you heard the video from yesterday, how this is going to go. I kept my feelings bottled up because I didn't want to remind him of what I'd done. I was on medical leave for 3 months and none of my friends knew. As far as they knew, Sam, my husband, and I had miscarried, as did my parents. I had nobody to talk to. I asked Greg to come over and we talked. I cried and he cried with me. It felt good to be heard and not have to wear a mask. These visits happened another half a dozen times, and it's important to know nothing sexual happened. Yeah, because you've been so honest up until here. This is the dude that she had the affair with, and he kept coming over to that dude's house to comfort her. She can't let this guy go. You can't expect people to like, oh, okay, we'll take your word at face value here because nothing happened, given the track history. The affair was over. I was leaning on a friend, the only friend who knew what I was going through. I'm sure you could have told somebody else, but you chose this guy. That says a lot. You know the rest. Husband came home, found out Greg was the father. We moved away and things got better. These were great years, and I loved him with my whole heart. Sure. I never forgot what happened, but we talked about having our own children. I was happy, and I had him to thank for that. When I found out I couldn't have children anymore, I tried to tell him, but I remembered the way he looked at me years ago when he found out. The names he called me, I thought of how much he loved me and didn't want to ruin that by telling him I could never give him children because of my betrayal. I reached out to Greg, the affair partner, again. I told this guy, in the video, they moved across the country and she quit her job and everything. And I said in the video yesterday, it doesn't make a difference where they go. They could live in another side of the country. They could live on the moon. Her personality, her character is not going to change no matter what the situation is. And here she is going back to the old affair partner again. I reached out to Greg. I found out he moved away from our hometown too, and was only a few hours drive away. He is married now. But I wasn't looking to start anything back up, only to talk. Sure. He told me I should tell Sam. I couldn't. We agreed to meet, and I took the day off work. We met halfway, and we, wait for it, slept together. Remember what happens when she's upset and lets things bottle up and not talk about it, and finally... Again, this is how the whole mess started in the first place. Now she's hooking up with this dude again, except this time, he's married. So not only is she a home wrecker for her own home, but also his family. Now this guy is a piece of crap too, don't get me wrong, but we're focusing on this story here. So we slept together. We agreed it would be a one-time thing, and both went back to our partners. To anyone who wants to call me a WHORE, I know it was wrong, but life isn't black and white. I don't regret anything. That's what people say who screwed up royally, but don't want to feel like total losers, like, I don't regret what I did. Yeah, bullshit. I love them both, and for better or worse, they will both always be a part of what makes me who I am today. I got drunk and told Sam everything. I was hurt and cruel to him and told him I wasn't sorry I met up with Greg. He called me a WHORE again. You can't blame him. And told me he was glad I gave up the baby. I slapped him, and he slapped me back. I don't resent him at all for hitting me. He had never lifted a hand to me before, and I said awful things that night. But after he told me he was glad that the choice he forced me into deprived me of being able to be a mother, that I can forgive. I'll never forgive myself for the procedure, and I will never forgive him. The difference is he gets to move on and have a family, and I never will. All all this happened because of her actions. Now, this guy, again, was a dumbass for marrying her, let alone staying with her when things really started going bad. But at the end of the day, she is no saint. And her side of the story here, you can see, I mean, even though she's trying to sugarcoat things and make it out to be, it's not so black and white, even the most unbiased person can see who the real a-hole in this story is. She continues, I'm back home now with my parents, and I've spoken to divorce lawyers too. They say a prenup doesn't mean anything anymore. Remember that, gentlemen. But I'm not going to take anything away from you. She's addressing the guy in the story. I just want it to be over too, so maybe we can both find some peace. Now we're going with a post update. After she'd been seeing a therapist for a while, and wait till you see the change in, she's singing a different song now. There's a change in tune now. Says, I talked to a therapist today. I read all your comments, because she posted this story, and now she's editing it with this update. I read all your comments last night and this morning. And when I came back, I've been reading all your messages all day, even if I haven't replied. I've been reading and digesting all of it. Some people have been really kind and told me I'm only human and made mistakes. We're all human, and we all do make mistakes. You know, a mistake could be forgetting to take the car in to have it checked out when the check engine light's on and the car has some problems because of that, or you forgot to pay the bills on time. But these are serious, life-altering mistakes. And come on here. These comments took place in private message. I imagine for fear on behalf of the other commentator of being mocked. Some people took a harsher line and told me that I was completely to blame and a total F-up. But that's not too late, and I can always turn it around. No, you cannot turn this. She can try to turn her own life around. I say people don't change, but she has the opportunity to. She's only 32 years old. I mean, that's not young, but it's not old either. But the odds are most people don't change, and she's not going to change who she is. And some of you, let's be honest, the sweeping majority of you have been awful, horrible, hate-filled pricks who have entirely too much invested in an internet stranger's marriage and extramarital affairs. You should all maybe look at your own lives and try to figure out why you feel the need to go online and tell bad people why they're bad people. Well, they could say, why do you feel the need to go online and share your story and your dirty laundry with the world? So it can go both ways. That being said, every message has helped me. The cruel ones shook me to my core. And had they not been so brutal and so many, I could have maybe shrugged them off. But there have been over 1,000 comments on this page, and there are probably less than 100 that aren't some variation of calling me a C word, or a WHORE, or a monster. And even when I stopped replying, I kept reading. You can't tell this story, lady, and not get a lot of negative backlash. I mean, come on here. And you know what? I think this is something that she needed to really realize her actions were wrong. She needed this. One could argue they're doing her a favor. And then she can choose how she handles it. I kept reading. I've read every single word that every single one of you has typed. It shook my foundations and allowed cracks to appear that I've been chipping away ever since. I read all last night, slept 4 hours, read again, saw my therapist, and read some more. She definitely needs therapy. So I'll give her credit. She's seeing a therapist. Hopefully that helps. The kind of messages were a life ring. I needed those too. But again, if they had been the majority, I could have taken the easier road. I needed the breath of air every once in a while, but the poison cleaned me out. And the moderate messages kept me grounded between the extremes. She's even admitting that the negative, really nasty messages actually kind of woke her up. I don't want to detail everything on here that my therapist and I talked about because this is already a rant and I'm not done yet. But within an hour, with a paid professional and 1,000 insults, held a pretty inescapable mirror up to my face. Sam did absolutely nothing wrong. There you go. Her husband, or soon-to-be ex-husband. Right there. Now you're going to see a major change in her attitude once she's read thousands of comments, hate comments, and seeing a therapist. Sam did absolutely nothing wrong. I would say I forgive him for the procedure, but there's nothing to forgive. That was the biggest realization I had. I put him in an awful position and asked him to do something that probably would have driven him to suicide. Yes, exactly. I chose to have the procedure and mutilate my own body beyond repair. I alone chose that. I selfishly destroyed my marriage twice by cheating because effing and forgetting being a grown-up was easier than being an adult and standing by the man I swore to love and expected such staggering loyalty from. Right, she wanted all the loyalty, but loyalty to her didn't mean shit. I betrayed him in ways I, as a woman, am incapable of ever understanding, and I have to live with that. And my mutilated body forever, and I should live with that forever as a reminder. I want to express my genuine gratitude to each and every one of you, but there are two people I want to thank in particular. Now she's babbling on about who she wants to thank. I'm going to skip that part. Finally, she says, I'm grateful to all you, and I will keep reading comments or PMs if any of you have anything to say. I'm open to talking to people. I will not be replying to any more hate messages, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't type them because I will see them, and if you really need to keep telling me what a diseased person I am, then do it, because I am. Someone just made a post about a retarded dog, and it was the first time I smiled in 2 days. So I'm not sitting here crying and being a victim. I'm digesting it all. Thanks. And that is the end of her take on the whole situation. And like I said, guys, in the beginning, it's interesting, the majority of the story, how she's telling it from her perspective, and you can see how just the blinders are on. He's the bad guy, you know, and finding excuses for her actions. Then after posting it and getting thousands of comments, majority of people that are really reading her the riot act, meeting with a therapist, she claims, I'm going to emphasize the claiming part, oh, I see the light now. I don't blame my husband. It wasn't his fault. I'm the a-hole here, etc., etc. And you know what? She was. Now, hopefully by some miracle, this December, a Christmas miracle, maybe, just maybe, this will knock some sense into her, and it might be on a clean slate. I doubt it because I've lived long enough to certainly be a bit pessimistic, and I've experienced enough to know people generally don't change, but you never know. Best thing she can do is let this husband go. Let him go. Give him an easy divorce. He can move on. She wants to redeem herself. Do that. And get some serious help with communication with people in her life, because every time you saw her here when she didn't like what was going on, she just bottled up inside and then got revenge by cheating, and you saw how this... And this wasn't one time, multiple times. It made the husband out to be the bad guy. He wasn't a bad guy. You know, he was a bonehead for marrying her. And he was a bonehead for staying with her after all that shit. But we do make mistakes, but that's a mistake versus the action she took. So there you go, guys. A long video, but I thought you'd enjoy the big take on this. Here comes the sun right behind me, shining in. So it's time to wrap this thing up. It's getting to be dark soon. It gets dark at like 4:15 here in Massachusetts. Anyhow, guys, that is it for today. Be sure to comment down below. Let me know what you think about this. And be sure to like the video, share with your friends, and subscribe. And I'll catch you next time.